Well, staying with that story, Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez says he will vote against a declaration of the Summit of the Americas in a gesture of protest against Washington. Chavez made the remarks in a warm-up meeting prior to the weekend meetings. Venezuela and other members of the Bolivarian Alternative for the Nations of Our America, known as ALBA, discussed their positions on Thursday. Chavez says the upcoming summit reinforces a U.S. foreign policy that treats the rest of Latin America as subservient to Washington's interests. He also argues that Cuba should not be excluded from the summit. Now let's go some live coverage on that. The Summit of the Americas, as we said, kicks off Friday in Port of Spain, the capital of the Caribbean island of Trinidad and Tobago. Our senior correspondent Yang Fuqing is now standing by at the summit venue with the latest on that. Yang Fuqing, thanks for joining us there. You are in Trinidad, as we said. What can you tell us about the meeting ahead, and what do you expect will be the highlights and the main issues?
Well, the 5th Summit of the Americas will be convened from the 17th to 19th right here in Port of Spain, capital city of Trinidad and Tobago. So starting tomorrow, heads of states and government leaders from 34 countries, including President Barack Obama of the United States and President Hugo Chavez from Venezuela, will be spending 3 days discussing some of the pressing issues facing the Western Hemisphere. The theme of the summit is human prosperity, energy security, and environmental sustainability. But against the backdrop of the current global financial crisis, how to deal with the crisis and how to revive the economy in this part of the world will be high on the agenda. Other issues the delegates are likely to discuss about also include fighting illegal drug trafficking and border control, as well as Cuba, which is the only country in the Western Hemisphere that is not represented at the Summit of the Americas. At the end of the summit, a declaration is likely to be signed by the leaders touching on most of these major issues. So there's a lot to see at the summit. Back to you, James.
Absolutely. Well, you just mentioned Cuba. Let's return to that, because just days ago, Barack Obama announced the lifting of travel restrictions on Americans traveling to that island. How was that U.S. move received locally in Latin America? And do you expect that Obama will have more to offer on the Cuba issue and, of course, on American policy in the region in general?
Well, President Obama's announcement on easing travel restrictions for Cuban Americans to travel to Cuba is very well received here in Latin America. In a couple of days, we have been talking to local officials as well as people on the streets, and they all said that this is a right step in the right direction. But there's also common belief that the United States should do more. And the delegates to the conference, particularly Latin American leaders, are likely to raise their voice again, calling on the U.S. to lift the trade embargo completely. But analysts believe that won't happen soon. And President Obama's announcement prior to the summit is seen as a good gesture to Latin American leaders. It is also an indication that President Obama doesn't want to let the Cuban issue distract attention from other major issues, including the economy, the energy, and fighting crime. What that means is President Obama has already made his offer on the Cuba issue. The Cuba issue is likely to be raised at this conference. Again by the leaders. There's also voices from the People's Summit on the sidelines of this summit calling on the U.S. to lift its trade embargo on Cuba. As to the U.S. relations with Latin America in general, Latin America is seen traditionally as a backyard of the United States, and the economies in the U.S. and Latin America are very much interdependent. So as the global crisis broke out in the U.S., many parts of Latin America are also seriously affected. So most Latin American countries are looking to President Obama for more concrete measures and actions in dealing with the financial crisis and in reviving the economy in this part of the world. And President Obama said that his administration is going to give the respect to Latin American countries they deserve. That means that the U.S. will change its policy that the U.S. has been criticized in the last several years for neglecting this part of the world, and President Obama is going to seek what the U.S. can do with Latin American countries instead of for Latin American countries. So President Obama expected to set a new tone in U.S. relations with Latin America. Back to you, James.
Well, let's squeeze in one quick question. We're almost out of time here, because in recent years China has strengthened relations with Latin American countries, particularly with regards to the economy and also trade. Will relations between China and Latin America likely be on the agenda?
Well, relations between China and Latin America is not likely to be a major issue on this summit, but it is not without relevance. China has been very active in promoting trade cooperation with Latin American countries, particularly starting from the year 2000. We have seen a quite robust development of trade between China and Latin America, and by 2007, the trade volume between China and Latin American countries has topped $100 billion, and China has become, in fact, one of the major trading partners of Latin American countries. And China, only just in January this year, has become a member of the Inter-American Development Bank and providing funds for the economic development and fighting poverty in this part of the world. And quite interestingly enough, that across the street of the hotel where I'm staying, Chinese workers are helping build a major cultural facility in the Caribbean countries, an art center for Trinidad and Tobago. So China is quite active in this part of the world in recent years, and we talk to people here in Mexico, on our way to Trinidad and Tobago, and also here in Porto, Spain, in this country, that they all expressed appreciation for China's involvement in economic development in Latin America. So China's role in Latin America is very much welcome. Back to you, James.
Well, thanks very much. The Summer America is kicking off on Friday in Trinidad and Tobago. That was Yang Fuqing reporting for us there. We'll have more for you on that in our later programs through the weekend.